Welcome back to the channel. It's me, Paco. It is the first video for the new year, and for the first video of the new year, I wanted to take a bit of a new direction by sharing some knowledge with you all. I'm not the best photographer out there. I'm no Annie Leibovitz or Ansel Adams, but I do know a bit of the basics well enough to share this with you and can help beginner photographers out there. Now, what we're going to talk about are the basics, so it doesn't matter if you're shooting with a phone camera, with a compact camera, DSLR, or a mirrorless camera. The basics all apply. Which we'll start with this episode, where we talk about shutter speed. So, we have to remember that photography is manipulating light, and the cameras give us three main controls to do so. These are shutter speed, aperture, and ISO, or ISO. Now, shutter speed, what is shutter speed? Shutter speed is the amount of time you let light into the camera to hit the sensor or the film. Get a bit of a sip from this. Hits the spot. Now, this can range from a fraction of a second, something like 1/200th of a second, and can go up to 30 seconds, usually being the longest. The best way I could demonstrate this here, I've got my trusty Canon 1300D with a 50mm lens. But the best way to demonstrate this is for me to fire this without the shutter. Sorry, without the lens. We got, see, and there. But there's your mirror, and if I hit the shutter, that is 1/200th of a second. If we kick that all the way up to something like, I'll just do 2 seconds for the sake of demonstration. If we do 2 seconds, it's gonna look something like this. There's your sensor. And there it is closing. So that is shutter speed. It's the amount of time that you allow light to enter the camera. So shutter speeds do two things to your photo. It controls the exposure. It allows you to brighten or darken the image depending on how fast or slow the shutter speed is. And it allows you to freeze or show motion. The faster the shutter speed, the quicker it captures or it shuts off the light. So if something's moving and you want to freeze that motion, you want a faster shutter speed. If you want to show motion, you can use a longer shutter speed. It'll open up the sensor. It'll open up the camera longer for light to hit the sensor. And you can see motion blur in the form of the object moving, not being clear, or you can see light streaks, which you get in nighttime photography with the cars passing by. So why is this important? If the image is overexposed or too bright, you can use a faster shutter speed to let less light in. Now, if your image doesn't look sharp enough, it might not be because you're out of focus, but it might be because you're using a slow shutter speed that the camera is picking up your hand shaking. So ideally you want to use shutter speed somewhere around 160, 200 seconds. Again, there's a whole thing that depends on the lens. We'll get to that in a future video. But there, shutter speed can eliminate camera shake, not just the motion of your subject, but the motion of your actual hand shaking. Also, if we don't have enough light coming in, such as when we're shooting at night, we can shoot with longer exposures. You can use longer shutter speeds. And what that allows us to do is let more light come in. But, you have to be wary about your hand shaking and all that, so you'd most likely need a tripod. So longer shutter speeds need a tripod, and it's usually used for landscape. And this is why we see nice shots, like, for example, shots in the city where you see those light streaks of cars and vehicles, headlights, taillights passing by. but you don't see people. Because longer shutter speeds, the cameras, the shutters open for longer, lights coming in, and if a person's passing by, they don't register. If a person stays steady, for if it's a 30-second exposure, the person's there, they're gonna register. But if a person's just walking by, they don't register on camera. So if you've got this nice subject in a cityscape shot or landscape, and there are people moving by, you can use longer shutter speeds to eliminate people in the shot. So you have to remember that shutter speed is one of the two main controls in getting a proper exposure. It ties in with aperture and ISO. So when you increase your shutter speed or decrease your shutter speed, and you want to get a proper exposure and it starts to get too bright or too dark, you have to compensate with your aperture settings or your ISO. We'll get to that in the next video where we talk about, not ISO, we'll talk about aperture. Aperture is the next thing we're going to talk about. So yeah, until then, I'll see you in the next video.